The first line of the film Lucy is, quote, "Life was given to us 1,000,000,000 years ago. What have we done with it?" This already indicates the presupposition that 1. Life was given to us, and 2. We as humans are responsible for our own destiny. These ideas are very humanistic in principle, which stems back to the Luciferian doctrine, which states that Lucifer is the life giver, and that through this gift of knowledge we will come to our ultimate liberation from the confines of space, time, and matter. During this sequence, more animalistic behavior is depicted by interlacing shots of the leopard hunting deer in the wild. Lucy, who was the one being preyed upon in the scene, just so happened to be wearing a jacket with spots like a leopard, serving as foreshadow of what she would become, not the hunted, but the hunter, and way beyond. The other interesting element of this is that a leopard is described as what the beast looked like in Revelation 13, something that I will explore in a future video. But the main overall point was this: the animalistic side of human beings is the starting point, ground zero on the road to godhood as the film depicts it. The same point is made when Lucy is forced into the hotel room with the main man drug dealer dude who was in the middle of killing some folks in the closet. When he emerges covered in blood, the scene takes an unusually long time, showing him cleaning the blood off of his hands with water. I believe this was signifying that humanity, or man, is guilty of not being responsible agents of life. But the deeper implications we will see later is that this Asian gang leader, I believe, was a mocking representative of Jesus Christ, and I'll show later why. But staying on point here, I believe the washing of the blood here signified a common atheistic accusation that mankind, especially with their religion, has been responsible for much bloodshed throughout the centuries. Now earlier I mentioned a flash scene of Lucy partying, used as a commentary that such behavior is part of the animalistic side of humans. Well, after the suitcase was opened by Lucy, the blue substance they find inside is tested by the thugs by bringing in one of their hostage prisoners and making him snort the blue crystal. The guy who was forced to snort it was wearing a shirt that said "Youth in Revolt," which I thought was very interesting. Perhaps this was an indication that the youth who are unworthy of being included in the illumination of man have been manipulated into appealing to their animalistic instincts in rebellion of authority, hooked on drugs, etc., so as not only to dumb down, but to keep down society at large from ever gaining any insight or access to the sacred knowledge. Back to Dr. Norman, an expose on the Luciferian doctrine via the transhuman processes is displayed. Without getting into all the details, he asserts that the commodity of mankind and life is time, very similar to what we saw in Jupiter Ascending. Thus, for the survival of the species is to either reproduce or become immortal. He uses a biological cell as an analogy when he states, quote, "If its habitat is not favorably nurturing or sufficient," interject montage of natural disasters, "the cell will choose immortality. If the habitat is favorable," insert serene and peaceful scenery, "they will choose to reproduce. That way, when they die, they hand down essential information to the next cell," and so on. This knowledge and learning are handed down through time. Lucy's transformation takes a very specific direction, and being a good person is not a part of it. Her metamorphosis caused her to completely lack moral values, compassion, and consideration for other human beings. Apparently, being extremely intelligent turns you into an evil transhuman robot. Lucy herself says, quote, "I don't feel pain, fear, desire. It's like all things that make us human are fading away. It's like the less human I feel, all this knowledge about everything, quantum physics, applied mathematics, the infinite capacity of a cell's nucleus, they're all exploding inside my brain." This is a quote we will revisit later on. When Lucy rampages her way into a hospital to have the bag of crystals removed from her intestines, she calls her mother and reveals her sense of losing her humanity, stating, quote, "I feel everything. Space, the air, the vibrations, the people. I can feel the gravity. I can feel the rotation of the earth. And leaving my body, the blood in my veins, I can feel my brain, the deepest parts of my memory." She goes on to recall memories of infancy and proceeds to tell her mom she loves her and her dad. As the package of crystals are removed from her stomach, the doctor somehow knows what it is and explains that it's a substance called CPH4. It is explained by the doctor in this way, quote, "Pregnant women manufacture CPH4 in the 6th week of pregnancy in tiny quantities. For a baby, it packs the power of an atomic bomb. It's what gives the fetus the necessary energy to form the bones in its body. I heard they tried to make a synthetic version of it." End quote. This substance has been a major topic of discussion online, sparking discussions to the accuracy of the substance, especially after the director stated that the substance is real. The Vigilant Citizen quoted an interview with the director. He stated, quote, "Is there any scientific truth to Luc Besson's premise? Here's a part of an interview with Besson discussing the science behind Lucy. Question: Some people are complaining about the fact that the science behind your film The whole idea that humans only use 10% of their brains is not true. What's your response to that? Answer: it's totally not true. Do they think that I don't know this? I worked on this thing for 9 years and they think that I don't know it's not true? Of course I know it's not true. But you know, there are lots of facts in the film that are totally right. The CPH4, even if it's not the real name, because I want to hide the real name, this molecule exists and is carried by women at 6 weeks of pregnancy. End quote. While this is interesting to consider, I think in reality it's taking something that has interesting attributes for the human development in the womb and using it analogously rather than literally for the film. The substance is quote-unquote real, but the effects are dramatized for the sake of storytelling, in my opinion. Rather, the implications metaphorically are that similar to a baby in the womb whose growth accelerates rapidly with the release of this alleged hormone in week 6, we humans are in this embryonic stage until we discover or unlock what alchemy has been teaching for centuries as the Philosopher's Stone. In other words, CPH4 is a metaphor for the Philosopher's Stone, and the mere fact that it was a natural occurring substance that was synthetically manufactured in the film speaks into the idea that it will be man to discover and recreate this substance that grants access for humanity into higher spheres of existence, unlocking our full human potential. Now, earlier I said that the Asian thug leader, I thought, represented a mockery of Jesus Christ. Here's why I think that. Lucy goes back to her original captors, and when she finds the leader of the Asian gang, she does something very interesting in revenge. She puts knives through his hands. Was this mocking the crucifixion of Jesus Christ? At 28% of access to her brain, Lucy tracks down Dr. Norman and calls him up, explaining to him that not only had she read all his material, which occurred over a few seconds as she basically downloaded the data off the internet, but that he was right on track. She explained to Dr. Norman of her abilities and demonstrated it with her control over phones, radio, and computers. This is obviously similar to the NSA spying on us through all sorts of devices. And in the Vigilant Citizen article, he points out that the TV and all the gadgets in the movie are from Samsung, a company that was recently in the news for their ability to, quote, watch us back through the TV. But think about what's being portrayed here and why we are being watched and surveilled. It's because of this Luciferian doctrine that is behind it. In other words, the elite feel justified in doing all this spying because they believe it is part of their metamorphosis into godhood and being omniscient. This is also the scene where Lucy explains herself in a quote I cited earlier where she says, quote, I feel no pain, fear, desire. It's like all things that make us human are fading away. It's like the less human I feel, all this knowledge about everything, quantum physics, applied mathematics, the infinite capacity inside of a cell, it's all exploding in my brain. I don't know what to do with it. And according to Dr. Norman, what she should do with it is pass it down. This is fascinating because it's precisely what the Watchers, or the fallen angels, are depicted as doing in the Book of Enoch. According to the text, this was an act of defiance to God because mankind would not handle this information properly. In the Book of Enoch, chapter 10, verses 6 through 8, it states, quote, and so that, on the great day of judgment, he may be hurled into the fire, and restore the earth which the angels have ruined, and announce the restoration of the earth. For I shall restore the earth, so that not all the sons of men shall be destroyed because of the knowledge which the Watchers made known and taught to their sons. And the whole earth had been ruined by the teaching of the works of Azazel, and against him write all sin. As the film progresses in a moment of near destruction, when Lucy's environment didn't suit her nurture, she emerges from the event with not only control of others, but more and more control of physical reality, even with the capacity to see, isolate, and read cell phone signals. As we march towards the end of the film, let me briefly interject here that this wasn't the best movie in terms of flow or acting, but it didn't have to be. It wasn't about making a good movie. It was about externalizing the philosophy to the masses in order to indoctrinate them. So as we lead up to Lucy's apotheosis, she has to get a hold of the rest of the CPH4, or the Philosopher's Stone, for her final transformation. So on her way to attaining it, from a convergence of Asian thugs, the French authority, and the hostages which the substance was surgically implanted into their tummies, Lucy takes a peculiar route to the location, and I believe this sequence or car chase scene was very deliberate and symbolic of the occult initiation and the ceremony about to take place. After flipping over some cars, injuring civilians, and probably killing some of them, we see Lucy driving towards an obelisk. Now this is going to get a bit fringe, but again I think this is completely intentional. This is the obelisk of Luxor at the Place de la Concorde in France. This is what it looks like from up high. Now I'm using this drawing because Google Earth won't let me use actual footage, but you guys can go look for yourselves. I will leave the coordinates in the description section. But here's what we see. Lucy heads straight towards the obelisk. Then she makes a hard left turn, so she becomes parallel with this interesting geographical layout. And I know this is the direction she took because right after, Lucy is seen driving by the Vendome column, which is found here. So as she moves up this geographical layout, she would have passed the Arc de Triomphe de Carrousel, or the Arc of Triumph, which leads to a symbol of the rising phoenix, which also resembles the Eye of Horus, which then gives way to the Louvre Pyramid, or the Glass Pyramid, of which, if you recall, in the Da Vinci Code is where Mary Magdalene might have been buried in a submerged stone pyramid beneath the inverted pyramid. Now, all this again leads to the idea of searching for and attaining the stone to unlock the keys for illumination. And what does Lucy do once she takes this passage? She retrieves all the CPH4, then proceeds to meet up with Dr. Norman for her, quote, sacrifice, which is her apotheosis. Once in the presence of Dr. Norman and his team members, Lucy explains the nature of reality, which was basically pantheistic monism. Monism is defined as the view that reality is a unified whole and that there is an ultimate substance behind all of nature. And furthermore, pantheistic monism identifies God with the universe and all that is in it. It is summarized often with the phrase, all is one is all is God. As her transformation begins, first, we see the Philosopher's Stone interact with her larynx. Now, if you recall a video, Androgyny and the Antichrist, I quote Bill Cooper, who mentioned the ancient alchemical beliefs that said mankind was lifted from primordial animal and given a brain and a larynx as tools to guide us to godhood. So it's no surprise to see the larynx depicted here. As the apotheosis continues, Lucy is taken back through time. In fact, the final thing she conquers in transforming into a god is control of time. She is taken all the way back to the presence of the alleged first humanoid ancestor, according to the theory of evolution, properly named Lucy. And in true Luciferian fashion, she extends her finger and gives the earthbound humanoid the spark of life, or the light of illumination, the gift of knowledge. Lucy is Lucifer, the light bearer. Meanwhile, outside the doors of this science lab, the violence persists as the Asian gang leader and those with him make their way to find Lucy to kill her. In the process, the statue of Robert de Sorbonne, who was a 13th century French theologian who was an advocate for higher education and is now associated with the University of Paris, is destroyed. I think the fact that the nose was destroyed on the statue is reminiscent of the Sphinx and could be commentary suggesting that man's own animalistic behavior was responsible for ancient instances where humans ignorantly caused the destruction of knowledge while the illumined ones attained immortality. Thus, the futility of man's ability to harness and use this knowledge for good. And perhaps another reason why the occult elite feel that the knowledge has to be kept hidden in plain sight, like in this film. As Lucy reaches 90% capacity and beyond, the Asian gang leader finds her and is about to pull the trigger of the gun pointed right at her head. But in that moment, she is transferred into the singularity, reaches 100% brain capacity, and disappears, becoming God. The Asian thug is then killed by one of the French authorities who was in the car chase with Lucy earlier. Then the supercomputer that Lucy had built provides a flash drive for Dr. Norman, which contains all the knowledge of the universe, passing it down as he suggested earlier. I can't help but think this is similar to the concept of occult objects like the Emerald Tablet or the Tablets of Destiny, where the knowledge of the universe was contained therein and passed down. When the French authority asks, "Where is she?" Lucy responds by giving her a message through his cell phone, "I am everywhere." The final line of the film, quote, "Life was given to us a billion years ago. Now you know what to do with it." In conclusion, it is clear that this film is an outward expression into the public sphere of the goals for the elite. We saw occult symbols, the Philosopher's Stone, and the quest for immortality. We saw the Luciferian philosophy and the idea of apotheosis and the singularity by which technology will play a major role. But really, is our goal to become God? Not so.